I mean, I love the diversity of it. I love the gelato aspect of it. I love, working back in a hotel with the team there, and then even the restaurants. I just think it's kind of, it keeps me busy, and I kind of like just like the variety.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. The melting pot of cultures down under has created the most incredible restaurant industry. It's created subcultures dedicated to different cuisines where communities come together to celebrate their heritage and new home too. It's also seen many mixed families where different cultures combine in one household to deliver incredible food experiences for those growing up. Adam Dsylva is the executive chef and co-owner of Coda and Tonka, owner of Boca Gelato and the culinary director of the W in Melbourne. Adam, you're pretty busy.
Just a bit.
Adam, you grew up in an Indian-Italian household. What was food like for you growing up?
It was very interesting. I mean, interesting now you look at it, but it was the norm. The norm was a bowl of pasta and a bowl of curry and a bowl of rice on the table because my father's Anglo-Indian, born from Chennai, migrated when he was about 20, and my mum is from Abruzzo, from Sulmona in Italy, and migrated when she was about 10. So, I'm first generation Australian and Melbourne born and bred.
Wow. It will take us back to when you were young. Is there any sort of feasts or influences when you were a kid that you can tell us about?
100%. I mean, I grew up in a butcher shop. Father was a butcher, so since I was born, and then also the other extended family were into like the wine industry. And I grew up I was mainly minded by my nonna, whose house was pretty much a farm, its own ecosystem.
Wow.
Like all vegetables growing, chickens, every fruit tree you can think of, from figs to grapes to, locusts, and then making salami, making your own wine. So pretty much, making everything. So that was just the norm growing up in like a really, bountiful backyard.
When did you first realise that perhaps chefing was something that you might be interested in for a career?
I realised when I was in I would have been probably about maybe 8 or 9. I kind of really loved cooking. And, one of the first dishes I learned how to make was gnocchi with my nonna when I was about 3. I used to just always help her either knead the dough. She'd let us do that, and also, turning the pasta wheel, because back then there wasn't anything motorised. So that was our job. So just always always surrounded by food. I just I love food, but I didn't really understand back then what it would be like to be a professional chef.
Well, tell us about that first step into commercial cookery. What was it like during your apprenticeship compared to what you grew up with in the home?
Well, very different. When I started, I was always working in the butcher shops, washing dishes on the weekends, or even working every school holidays in the butcher shop, because that's what you do. And then working for someone else, being a kitchen hand in a restaurant called Fiorelli's in Camberwell, which is still around 27 years later.
Wow.
And then making pizzas 3 nights a week during my year 12 on a Friday, Saturday and Sunday nights. So that taught me how to do service, how to answer a phone, how to chop pizzas, how to pull them out of the oven, and work with a crazy Sicilian man who used to always send me up to the tab and collect his winnings, and then he always used to just yell abuse at his wife every time. So it was quite anyway, yeah, but that was an amazing experience. And so then I just started my apprenticeship at the Hilton on the Park, which was a process back then to get an apprenticeship there. Had to do almost like a foodie exam.
Wow.
So, the exec chef back then was a hard-ass German called Werner Kimmeringer, and he gave 6 apprentices a box of food, and we had to make a salad out of it. And looking back at it, I was the only one that actually kept the salad within the rim of the plate. And was a big creative. So then long story short, got the apprenticeship and started straight away after I finished my year 12.
Wow. You've done so many things since then. What's been the really integral moments in your career in the early days?
There's a few pivotal moments. There was one where I was in my about to hit my fourth year of apprenticeship at the Hilton. The current executive chef left to go work at another hotel. He went to go with Carlton Crest. I wanted to go work at the Sheridan on the Park back then. And long story short, because I didn't follow my executive chef, he gave me a bad rap. And this is just after I just won Apprentice of the Year at Box Hill TAFE also. So I wasn't, the worst going around, and didn't get the job at the hotel, and that's when I kind of just switched to restaurants. So that was a very big moment where I never looked back at, kind of, I guess, working in hotels, but now it's a full circle moment with me working back in a hotel at the W. So
restaurants have been a key feature of your career, and you've got some of Melbourne's best restaurants now, but you explored sort of Europe and Asia as a chef. Tell us about that period of time.
So I was at Cozzy. I went going from just doing international food at the Hilton to doing Italian food at Cozzy restaurant in South Yarra, which was great. I was young. I ended up heading up the kitchen at such a young age of I think 22, 23. Having a brigade, probably didn't have the experience, but knew how to get the job done. And so I did that for 3 years, which was a great experience. Great time of life in your 20s, also partying at the same time, as well as working hard as you did back in the late 90s. And then I had the opportunity where my Zio Mario organised me to go cook in Italy, to cook in Umbria.
Wow.
So that was another pivotal moment, because it was pretty much 12 months in Italy. I cooked in Umbria, then I went to a place called Perugia. Tojano. So I was there, and then I ended up going back up north to a place just out of Ancona called Loreto. So in a little Italian village there, which I had mates that I'd worked with back at Cozzy. They were from that area. So I went back and worked with them.
How different was cooking Italian food in Italy compared to what you had experienced in Australia?
Oh, cooking Italian food in Italy was, what was in season is what you cooked with. So when truffles are in season or tomatoes are in season, they're at their best. Where, in Australia, you could always get, you can get tomatoes all year round and strawberries all year round. But it was more the culture of it. You'd work 6 days a week. You go to work, you do prep, you sit down and have a proper lunch. There's always wine on the table, so you'd have a few vinos before service. You do lunch, and then have pomeriggio, they call it. So you'd either just go home and sleep, or I went and slept on the beach, and then after about 6 months of eating and drinking, because then at 5:30 you'd meet at the local cafe, you'd have an aperitif, go to work, do some prep, sit down, have dinner, and then do service, and then you go out to a bar afterwards. So about after 6 months of doing that, I was like, you know what? This is not good for me. This is not good for me. I got really fit, and I started going to the gym. Stopped drinking, and so just started going to the gym in the afternoon. And just so did that, and then I came back to Australia. I went via London, and I contemplated staying in London and working there. But I just didn't really, I kind of just miss my family and friends. Even my brother was in London at the time, but I was just like, I think it's just time to come back home to Australia. The lifestyle's great, in Italy, but you can always, with all my travels, I've always called Australia home or Melbourne home, and thought we've got the best standard of living anywhere. So I came back, and I applied for a job with Greg Maloof and a job for Jeff Lindsay. Greg Maloof was at Momo's, which is now where Philip Michelle is. And then there was Jeff Lindsay was a Pearl restaurant. I ended up taking the job with Jeff because I thought I never really did Asian food like he did it. And I really loved it, and I loved the whole restaurant. And so ended up working for him there, but also loved Greg Maloof's food, that Middle Eastern. And I think it was just also access to the city. It was just a lot of just, Pearl's in Richmond, seems pretty cool, liked the food. It was a 2-hat restaurant. I thought, so go with that one. And, fast forward, I ended up working there for 7 years.
Well, Pearl was a very influential restaurant in Melbourne's history. What was it like working with Jeff, and do you have any memories of that time?
Yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, he's been a great mentor of mine, and influenced the style of food that I cook now, and just the level of it, but also the creativeness of it. We had some really great times, and yeah, it was really good. It was really good. And then during that time, I was at Pearl. I met Martin Boats from Longrain. Jeff would always get some chefs down from Sydney to come and do some guest chefs from Matt Moran to Kylie Kwong to Stephen Snow to Marty Boats. So I ended up, he'd always come and ask me to help out when he came down to Melbourne for cooking classes and stuff. And then they were going to open, Longrain was going to come to Melbourne. And I do remember this, another pivotal moment. Was I was out, I saw Marty out, we were having a chat, and he said, okay, I'm coming to go to Longrain, Melbourne. And I said, well, who's your head chef? He goes, oh, this guy, Luke. I said, I said to him, I thought you'd make me your head chef. He goes, really? He goes, yeah. I said, I'd be your head chef. So I was head chef currently at Pearl, and so Marty the next day fired that head chef and made me the head chef at Longrain, Melbourne. And during that time, I won that Lexus Young Chef of the Year, Victoria twice with Luke Mangan's competition now, Appetite for Excellence, which was also a bit of a game changer helping build my profile. So I pretty much lived in Sydney for 6 months, training and learning all of Longrain's food. And then we opened up, Melbourne Longrain to, big fanfare, and was very popular. So that lasted about a year.
Well, tell us a bit about Melbourne Longrain, because it's such an institution, or was such an institution in Sydney. What sort of food were you cooking, and was there a lot of pressures for it to be successful given its status in Sydney?
Oh, there was a huge expectation and anticipation of, that's why, of making sure, did the food right, which we did. And Melbourne hadn't really experienced Thai food that way. So it was a great, experience, especially being in Sydney, then coming and doing it in Melbourne. And it was an institution, because that I think also was another landscape of, shared banquet style, Asian food, because it wasn't really happening in Melbourne back then. We're still in fine dining. So I guess it was, when you kind of look at it, I guess it was one of the first restaurants that did that shared style, and then, the cocktails. So it was great. It was really good. The food was great. It was hard work. There was hard work opening a restaurant. It was the first 6 months was the hardest that I reckon I'd ever worked. And I always said to myself after that experience that the next time I'd open a restaurant, I'm going to do it for myself.
Wow. Well, that eventuated in 2009, and you opened Coda. Tell us how that came about.
Well, that came about also while when I was at Longrain, I ended up getting a phone call from Jeff, because the year that I left in 2005, Pearl got awarded 3 chef's hats. So that was done under my leadership at Pearl, where we won 3 chef's hats, which was amazing. And then, but I was at Longrain, and then about a year later, Jeff rings me and goes, "Mate, can you come back and be head chef again? Because I need you. There's the current head chef's left, and And I said no problem. Things kind of fizzled out with at Longrain there, and went back to Pearl, and then within 2 years, opened Coda. Because I was just kind of waiting water just for the right opportunity came along, which it did with my business partners, Michael Bartholomew. His father got us together, Peter Bartholomew, who's also a bit of owns a bit of Movida and other restaurants, Lee Huck, and that's how it kind of came together. And I said I had the idea of doing, pearly kind of long-grainy food, but like also, as I said, like more of a Asian Movida, just keeping it really kind of cash, keeping it fun, shared style, and that's how the whole thing of Coda was based, and having that kind of French, European, Asian blend of food.
This episode is proudly supported by Montague, handpicked for you.
The things that we're really looking for in plums, first of all, they've got to be sweet. We're really looking for a full flavour explosion in our plums. Red flesh is critically important to us, higher in antioxidants, so all that good stuff. And then we're also looking to add a slightly firmer texture, so there's almost a little crunch. That's the real driver for us.
For more information, go to montague.com.au.
What were the challenges in the early days of creating your own restaurant that you hadn't been aware of previously?
Well, we bought what was called Mini, which was the first, I guess, Hellenic style restaurant in that Flinders Lane, and it was pretty much there was nothing there. Andrew McConnell just opened up Cumulus about a year before, and just opened up. So, and then George opened the Press Club about a year before that. So the challenges were, it was just coming up with the menu, and coming up with something that I think people would like to eat. So which I kind of did, and we just kind of went for it, But there was no fear, I guess, because I'd say to Michael, my business partner, said, "Look, I know how to cook, so I'm not scared, and you know how to obviously run the front of house. So let's just do what we always did for other people and do it." And it was a success. We hit the ground running. And once again, it was really hard the first 6 months, working every day, pretty much 6 days a week, making sure it all went well and all established and people liking what we were doing.
Well, tell us about your cooking in those early years with Coda. Is there a dish or two that you can tell us about that really exemplifies what Coda was doing?
Look, there was the sugarcane prawns, which we used to, get fresh sugarcane, wrap some prawn mousse around it, and I'd put some noodles around it so it's nice and crunchy. The crispy prawn beetle leaf in tapioca is also still on the menu. We've got some, the duck curry, Coda's duck curry, is still, on the menu and still one of the most loved dishes, which, I found inspiration from when, my time at Pearl and time at Long Grain, and then made my own version of it. So that's been, I guess next to the crispy prawn beetle leaves, the duck curry has to be one of the most successful or most loved dishes of Coda.
You spent your career cooking Italian and modern Asian and Thai, and then creating your own restaurant, and then Tonka came along and a chance to dive into your Indian heritage. Tell us about that restaurant and what it was like pulling a modern interpretation of Indian together.
Well, the way Tonka was born was actually my business partner Michael and I we kept on joking about we should open a modern Indian restaurant and call it Get It India. And the joke turned to reality when another site came up in the building that housed Honky Tonks, a very famous nightclub, which would have been maybe your era as well, but back in the late 90s, early noughties, so pretty much had. Yeah, we thought, well, let's do Indian, but not Indian. Let's make it modern. And because, referring back to my mother having to make curry every day for my dad, and that she never used ghee in her cooking, so it was always light. The curries were always light and light and tasty. And so I took that same principle to Tonka, and we don't use ghee. The only time we use ghee or butter is actually now in the butter chicken, and we use some ghee to brush the naan. So and then I had some great chefs work with me, Indian chefs who had brought also a lot of their kind of family recipes, and we just interpreted it in a nice way, using the produce of Australia that as we do, and just kind of just making it a bit more, not so much sort of delicate, but it just a bit more prettier, or just a bit more restaurant-y and not stodgy, because it was a very hard sell when we opened up Tonka, trying to get our Coda customers to come. You know, they'd ring up and the people go, "Oh, it's Indian. Oh, isn't it heavy and stodgy?" And we're like, "No, it's not, because it's ghee free." And once they came and actually tasted it, they were like, "Oh, wow, this is a bit different." So, you know, saying modern Indian, kind of, I don't think we're modern Indian, because we're still using like classic recipes or traditional recipes, but just kind of just presenting it in a different way. Also, so I know we don't trick the food up like a lot of I guess modern Indian restaurants do in India that I've experienced, and some that are in Australia. But it's just a place where, you know, there's staples on the menu. There's a lamb curry. There's a butter chicken. You know, there's ocean trout in the tandoori oven. Just really just simple but tasty food that people like. And then we have a beautiful array of wines and believe it or not, Italian wines, so which match well with Indian food.
Tonka and Coda are two of the most successful restaurants in Melbourne over the last decade. What makes a successful restaurant from your perspective?
Consistency. Consistency makes a successful restaurant, because you want the food to always be the same. You want the service to be the same. But there's also just, you know, I think the concept and what people want, and I think what we've created there is timeless food. It's not, I've never followed a fad. You know, one thing that Jeff taught me was always stay true to the culture and heritage of that cuisine. You know, it's existed for that many years, that, you know, put your little spin on it, but don't try and deviate from what the true essence of that cuisine is. So, sorry, go.
In Melbourne, you've experienced 5 lockdowns at the moment. What sort of impact has that had on you, and have the businesses changed as a result of that?
Lockdown number 5. Look, they're all blend into one. Doesn't. You could tell me lockdown 50, and be like, yeah, cool, same. And so, you know, we the thing is, we pivoted back in March 2020 straight away. My head chef Kayleen Tan, and executive pastry chef Kayleen Tan, you know, the next day she said, "Chef, I think we should just package all our curries up and everything and start selling them." And I went, "Great idea." So she was the integral part to that, turning that around. And we started, you know, selling through grocers like Toscanos and Boccaccio sellers. And that's why now we've got about 30-odd retailers. And so that's where we just sold our product. And that allowed us to keep the lights on, keep all the chefs, you know, even our visa holders employed, and all our full-time staff employed also. So that has been that was the pivotal moment, and that's kind of kept us, you know, now we created another business out of it, which we still have continued through when we've gone back to normal trading.
One of the real successes that you've had in the last year and a half as well is the creation of Boca gelato. Is that something that you'd been thinking of doing for years, or has it been a response to the current situation?
It was born out of COVID last August, when my gelati chef and business partner at Boca Gelato, Monica, long story short, we were having a chat because Kayleen asked us to go check out some guy's place who wanted to do gelati and sandwiches. And Monica came down. We met down there to see if the space was big enough. And she goes, "No, you can't make gelati out of this," because Monica was doing, you know, she'd been working at Piccolina and Gelato Papa in Melbourne here. And long story short, I said, "Why don't we just do our own gelati shop?" She goes, "Yeah, why not?" I said, "Perfect." So Monica, who also started as an apprentice at Coda and Tonka 7 years ago.
Wow.
So, and then that was the rest of his history. And I already had the name Boca from wanting to do an Italian restaurant about 3 years ago, which never came to fruition. So I always wanted to go back to my Italian side. And I said, well, I've got the name and the branding called Boca. Why don't we just add gelato to the end of it? And, we found a spot in Ivanhoe, which is my local suburb, and did a deal during COVID, and we opened up in April 2021.
What's the secret to great gelato?
That's a secret. Well, it's all made naturally. It's all made naturally. We don't use any artificial powders like some other ice creameries do or gelati places do. So keeping it keeping it real.
You just briefly mentioned that a couple of years ago you thought about veering back into your Italian heritage. Is that something that you might do in the future with a restaurant?
I may do that in the future, but I think maybe keeping it very simple, like either a pizza shop or pizza restaurant, or just pizza and pasta, but even just pizza, because I do think there's just one kind of burning desire to actually go back to where it all started from, making pizzas. And, just like gelati, I think they seem like they're pretty COVID-proof businesses, hence why I kind of like diversified into that.
You're also the culinary director at the W Hotel. What does it take to create something for a venue that has so many different outlets, like room service or restaurants?
Well, having said that, the W was the reason why I put my Italian restaurant on hold, because they approached me. I mean, the Marriott Group had always been talking to me over the years, wanting to go into certain different restaurants of theirs. So the Marriott Bonvoy is obviously a massive company with lots of different a massive umbrella, and has lots of different hotels underneath it. So when they asked me that, I thought W's on brand for me, and I said no problem, let's go. And obviously COVID hit, and there was a bit of a building delay with the construction of it. But then we finally got there and opened in February. And I guess that, the challenges is you got to still be international, but you also got to be relevant. And that's what I said, and I've brought to the W Melbourne is, I guess, my eclectic cuisine, cooking style, and I think pretty much my food defines Melbourne. So when the internationals came in, they would be getting a taste of what Melbourne is, being quite eclectic.
Well, can you give us a sense of what that is?
Well, I guess it's similar to what I created at Coda, but I've got to be able to put a bit more Italian into the menu, which is good. I've got I guess the hit dish of Lolo at the W, which is a flagship restaurant. There is my duck lasagna. So
wow,
that's what I thought. Cooked to water, like it's like a Rotolo style with the kind of duck bolognese base, and baked in the pizza oven there with more buffalo mozzarella. And it's a hit. I thought I wanted to actually elevate the lasagna and do it in some sort of way. So that's how it kind of came about, and it's been a hit ever since.
With your fingers in so many successful pies in Melbourne, what is it that you love about what you do now?
With my finger in so many different pies, I love the diversity of it. I love the gelati aspect of it. I love, working back in a hotel with the team there, and then even the restaurants. I just think it's kind of, it keeps me busy, and I kind of like just like the variety, and it constantly evolving. I've just started getting into more TV. With just finished filming a cooking show called India Unplated.
Wow.
So, which is going to be on the SBS. So that's, I guess, it's a version of Asia Unplated. So we filmed that, which is great. So just kind of just taking what you can and just making the most of every opportunity, as I always have.
Well, in the last year and a half, you've turned a lot of the adversity into positives, whether it be Tonka or the creation of Boca gelato. What's the positives to come out of the last year and a half for you personally as we move forward?
Well, I think I guess always just a positive person. I've got to wake up even during the lockdown, or the restaurant's getting shut down. Is that you always got to look at the things where you can make another opportunity out of. Always look at there's always something to be made out of it. And that's what gelati was born out of COVID. The W was there, and we finally got open, and then just being able to make the restaurant survive as well. I think there's a lot of positive, because I think it's just now going into the next level. Just starting to hit my strides in the sense of with what's going on. So,
well, Adam, we've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds to hear your story today. Good luck with the new initiatives that you have, and no doubt we'll hear of something new pretty soon as well. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
No worries. Cheers.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.